angry at myself. All right. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Welcome to a special Friday afternoon edition of Dyslexia Coffee Talk. And our guest today is Christopher Woodin. Most of you know him. You're following his website, woodinmath.com. He is the math guru that we defer to pretty much in this community. And he's got some pretty great products coming out with Nessie here soon as well. So, Chris, thank you for being with us today.
I'm very excited it's always fun listening to your work, and it's so exciting to listen to all the different coffee talks, but I always have fun talking with you. So I'm looking forward to this afternoon.
Well, thank you very much for that. I think we can go ahead and dive right in. And I really want to talk about, I'm going to back up. So first, let's talk about the difference between dyslexia and dyscalculia.
All right. There's a couple of big similarities in that they're labels. All right. Yep. So the thing, you get this diagnosis, and different people use different criteria for diagnosing this based on, what you're presenting with. But remember, it's an effect and it's not a cause. So when you're looking at dyslexia, the fundamental core deficit there is graphemes and phonemes are not strapping together, right? And with dyscalculia, it's very similar, but instead of a grapheme, you've got a non-symbolic code like a bunch of marbles that are on the floor, along with the Arabic number, right? Mm. And as it gets, it's something you can identify, just like with dyslexia, very early. You can start saying, if you're a pure dyscalculic, this can start being diagnosed at 4 and 5 years old. You can start just saying, here's a group of dots. How many are there? Which group is larger? Things like that, where it's not formal education about math that defines your issue. Now, as you get farther and farther down the academic road, it becomes farther and farther away from that primary deficit that can cause you math problems. You can be a wreck in math for a lot of different reasons. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. Lots of little things. You need to have so many things. And if you think about it this way, you can be quite terrible in math and be relatively literate, but the opposite is not necessarily true. If you have problems within the domain of language, that will have an impact on your ability to learn math. And the farther down the road you get from that primary disability, where it's just looking at quantities and strapping on labels and trying to do that with counting, which can be really not effective for some people, the more language has to play in that disability, right? So if you have a problem formulating just like kernel sentences, the dog ran and then expanded kernel sentences, that's the same as a math fact. So if you have a problem, with the sequencing, the syntax, all those things are going to come to bear within the constructs of math. So again, if you have language disabilities, those same disabilities will manifest themselves within the context of math. And as things get more difficult, like you start out at the symbol quantity level, right? And then you move to the comparison level, and that's where you start developing numeracy. So math is to numeracy as language is to literacy. You know what I mean? It's not just knowing math facts. It's being able to apply math to everyday situations and recognize math in regular everyday situations. Like there's three tennis balls in a can, things like that. And that goes with 3. And 3 is within 5. And how far is 3 away from 5? So that ability to compare, you have to have that fundamental, I can understand what 3 looks like. You know what I mean? And not just count it. It's kind of like saying, think of the alphabet song, A, B, C, D. Okay. Those kids, sometimes in the middle, there's a letter, LMNO. You know what I mean? Okay, that doesn't help you spell. Do you see what I mean? The alphabet song, it helps you sequence things, but you don't need to sequence letters to spell. And counting, after you count a certain amount, most kids don't quantify like 7 as 7 things when they're counting it. It's the number 8's coming up and 6 just happened, but they're not thinking of 7 things. It's that auditory cadence that they're conceptualizing. And you either do or you don't. So if you have a horrible auditory working memory, you don't. Do you see what I mean? So we're all pretty good with 1 through 4. You can look at it visually. If you drop 4 things and say, there's 4 things, don't count it. After that, the road diverges really significantly with dyscalculics. They'll count everything, including the first 4, even though they didn't have to. So what's the difference between kids that are diagnosed dyslexic or diagnosed dyscalculic? Well, it's kind of the similar kind of pathway that gets messed up a little bit. It's that part to whole kind of pathway that isn't effective. So again, trying to decode as a struggling or early reader, and you're trying to do synthetic phonics like k, at, t, right? And then you put it together from your dorsal stream and you're trying to go part to whole. That's hard, as opposed to when you learn that and you're efficient with it and you say it's cat, I see that chunk and I see that chunk in catnip, and you're able to do that in your temporal lobe and you're much quicker at it. Same kind of thing happens in math. It's just quantity simple. So again, where language starts coming in, language will impact math at the higher levels when you're trying to make sentences. And then later, what I call, with being a language guy, the discourse level. So when you're making an argument, when you're formulating a paragraph, that's like long division, being able to sequence that inner voice that drives you into the ability to put a lot of math ideas together and communicate. That's really the point where kids that have language problems have a big impact in math. And then there's also the specter of graph motor issues. So if you spell something today in language arts class and it's phonetic and you can work it out and understand it, most people are fine with that. But in math, if you spell 104, 1004, well, it's just really wrong. And it's going to be big red X, right? So that's that non-symbolic code and the symbolic code kind of strapped together. Can you take those codes and overlap them and use language to describe it? So it's those 3 things interacting. And like I said, the more complicated the task, the more language is being used to being able to hold everything together.
So that got me thinking about a dysgraphic child, who probably has poor sequencing and struggles with spacing and things like that, and how that dysgraphic child can understand the math, but potentially make mathematical errors because of how they're writing the math, not lining everything up correctly. And like you had mentioned right before we started, how some people are like, we'll give them graph paper. Or one of the things that I know I was told was, take your lined paper and turn it sideways and then have them write in the columns. Well, he couldn't write in the columns because he couldn't write that small. So
giving someone motor planning tasks with fine motor and perceptual cues without teaching the motor planning isn't going to work. So I teach kids to benchmark. So touch one side of the paper, the other side of the paper, the center. You know what I mean? Just own the space, the ground that you're going to put the figure on before you start. There's so many ways to attack that, but you need to know the individual. There's no global recipe for how to remediate. We've got a school and schools all over the country that I work with. They all have like dyslexic kids, right? And how you treat those dyslexic kids is different by the individual, because we're all a constellation of what we're good at and what we're bad at in terms of cognitive metrics, right? And so if you just try to throw, one big bucket of paint out there, that's what we're going to do. It's like it doesn't hit anybody, right? So if you try to treat with, here's an average type plan, well, it just basically, there's no average person. You see what I mean? Everybody has good things and bad things. And you have to acknowledge what they're good at. And it's usually crosses a lot of curricular domains. So, I mean, if you're bad in language arts, you're going to be bad at written expression, right? So same kind of thing. And so the strategies, need to be more global. A lot of the IEP goals that I write really don't have anything to do with specific math skills. Like I don't have long division as a math goal. I'll say this kid has horrible working memory and needs a graphic organizer and needs to be able to replicate their own graphic organizer. Now that's going to be that person, whether they're 6 or when they're 60, when they get a new task and they have to learn it and they don't have any working memory, they're going to need that strategy. So in the current performance, I say, look, go ahead and tell me which one you're working on that's grade level, but what you need to always be able to do to compensate for that issue that you have is a graphic organizer. So if it was more graphomotor, then you're going to need to know perhaps do gross motor skills. You're going to write on the chalkboard where it's more forgiving, and you can make errors, and it's not going to be, a deal breaker. Another great strategy is what I call intramodal processing, where I'll have a child on a whiteboard erase something like the division symbol with their finger and then rewrite it. So I might script them around 6 divided by 2 equals 3, and I'll say 6. The child will erase my 6 with their finger. So I just gave them the motor plan, right? In the same modality that they have to express it, right? And then they go with their motor memory and encode that. And then I'll say divided by, and they erase my division symbol, right? And then they write their division symbol. So I'm teaching them sequencing and the motor plan. 2, they write the 2, I'll erase my 2, write the 2. But all that stuff, if you're going to cue, how you cue a person is very important. You have to understand what works in a receptive modality for them. What are they able to take in that they can easily replicate and use to prompt expression, right? So sometimes that's cross-modal. I'll give you an auditory cue, or a semantic cue, which is more visual. So if I said horse, you're probably picturing a horse, right? So it's auditory, but it's concrete auditory, a noun, and you can picture it, and it starts giving a way to start organizing things. I don't know. I hope I answered kind of your question.
No, you did, but mentally, I also went down the rabbit hole of graphic organizers, because you teach primarily at the Landmark School, and I've taken the written expression course from y'all, your professional development that you have for teachers. I took it last summer, and it really kind of blew my mind from a graphic organizer point of view as a parent who's advocating for my child. From day one, everybody said, oh, we'll give them graphic organizers. But what I came to understand was nobody understood graphic organizers. They just thought that it was this piece of paper, maybe a plug and play, but really nobody on the team that I was dealing with understood what the true purpose of a graphic organizer really and truly was. And within the written the writing curriculum that you have at your school, you have a wide variety of graphic organizers, and they, but that it's not that they're all necessarily different, it's that they build on each other.
There's the vertical integration. All the larger structures are made of, small, more intricate structures that are, everything starts with a very consistent graphic organizer, and it gets built on, as opposed to, I'm going to give you 15 different graphic organizers. You see what I mean? Yeah.
And the idea is
that vertical integration.
Yep. And the idea being over time that the graphic organizer physically goes away because the student has it so ingrained in what they're doing that, because of course, within the professional development course that I took, it went from little kids to some of your high school students, right? And the high school students weren't handed a graphic organizer because by that point they understood it. And so on a blank piece of paper, they were essentially creating the form of the graphic organizer and then filling it in and then completing it out. So I'm wondering if you're doing the same thing with
I am the king of Yetis in terms of graphic organizers. And it's very consistent. So with multiplication, it's always the area model, and it gets more complex as it gets larger, but you have that same seminal idea of picture a 6-pack of soda. It's 3 cans wide and it's 2 cans high, and you can see the 6 in the middle. That's multiplication and division, both at the same time, right?
Yep.
So no, that's very important. And I go all the way back to all my numeracy work, just at, between pre-K and 2 has to do with picture my face. This is the greatest graphic organizer you have. So if you look at my eyes, my nose, and the corners of my mouth, that makes that cross.
Yep.
Now within that, do you see a triangle?
Yes.
And do you see a line?
Yes.
And do you see a square? Do
Yep.
you see what I mean? All right, so you have all this. So if I said start with this face, and you had perhaps 5 goldfish in front of you, and you had that same formation, and I said, take that away.
Mhm.
You see how I'm getting you. You've got that picture of
Yep.
what the 5 is supposed to be. And if I go like this and I say, put them back, and you put them back exactly in the same place, that's hold apart. Do you see what I mean? So that's my bread and butter. That's what a graphic organizer should do. It's like you understand what something looks like. You take a piece away, you pretty much drive subtraction, and then the kid replicates that, puts it back, so to speak, and then does it with language. And I just taught you subtraction and addition. I just have to strap the language to it. Do you see what I mean? And
Absolutely.
all those things are already resident in your temporal lobe. You've got a site right in there for facial recognition. So you make something very predictable, take something away, have the kid put it back, and strap language to it. And all of a sudden you've got this durable image in there that's supporting the language that's driven. So the picture is hold apart. Then you put part to whole language onto that. And that's what sequences it and puts it into long-term auditory memory. And it's all bundled in that one nice folder where one picture can drive all that. So eventually the kid learns to replicate that graphic organizer, and eventually they replicate it using just language cues as they put that in their inner voice.
Mhm.
As they learn to kind of mediate, what are they doing? Describe to me what you're doing. And they say it. And then that auditory script is in there, but it has meaning, and they can link it to the motor plan. Do you see? It all has to be integrated.
Mm.
So a lot of people give pictures, a static, here's a division problem, it's all done. But you need to have the soundtrack that goes with that. And it has to be driven by the kid. So
Mhm.
like the schools I work with, they generally have classes that are 8 or less. My elementary classes are usually between 5 and 7, right? So the reason is not that it's just you have more contact with the teacher, is that the teacher should be talking less than the students. You need to go, you say, Ashley, you did that problem well. That's awesome. Go up and show us how you did that at the board. And you're going to replicate that problem, but you have to add the soundtrack and link to that plan your language. Do you see what I mean? So you've got
Mhm.
a hold apart model where everything's there. You have to prioritize with your executive function, what you're going to start with, what's the figure and what's the ground, and then you're going to have to shift and put that into a linear sequential sentence. And if you can do that, you win.
I love that. I wish that you could be my son's math teacher. um, let's talk about, I'm going to ask a question on behalf of a friend of mine. So her son is dyslexic and dysgraphic. He does not have dyscalculia. And she has, several degrees in mathematics herself. She's been Orton Gillingham trained. She finds that her son is really struggling learning order of operations, to the point that she's like, can our children really learn the order of operations, or is that just too difficult? I mean, what she's looking for is there a way? And by the way, she's really jealous that I'm coming to Landmark this summer, because she's like, I want to see the pulley system. But that's her question, is how do we bridge that understanding with the order of operations that sometimes our children may really struggle with?
There's lots of ways to break that down and make it much more understandable. Basically, I have a couple of different strategies. One of my go-tos is I don't use sometimes it's just the complexity of the language when you're trying to describe it, or a lot of people have a mnemonic, they'll say PEMDAS, something like that.
Mm.
But I do a graphic representation, of the parentheses, and then e to the x. It doesn't have to have that in there. You can truncate it to this, and then multiplication, division, addition, subtraction, with arrows, and what they're going to do is they can refer to that, and they can see within the graphic organizers, they start looking for that architecture. Do you see this? And I model that, make sure they can do that step. So if you can't do all these steps in isolation, you got no business putting it within the complicated discourse of that, very, very complicated syntax and language, right? It's like giving the kid Ulysses and say, read until you get to a period. Well, you got a long road to go, right? It's horrible. So I'll say, look, do you see any parentheses? It's like, yes. Okay. So they underline the parentheses, connect them, right? And they perform that operation. And then over in the graphic organizer, they say, the first thing I'm going to do is the parentheses. They make the plan, then they execute that plan. You see what I mean? And then they keep looking for parentheses, and then until there aren't any. And again, they're making a list of the plan, so it slows them down and it makes them process all the information before they do it. Another way to scaffold this is, well, you might start out with maybe a two-step problem, right? So maybe there's a 6 times 2 plus 3. And the 2 plus 3 is in parentheses, right? Well, I might present those individual steps. Like, what's the first thing you're going to do is 2 plus 3, right? Well, the top of the worksheet, what do you think I'm going to put? 2 plus 3 by itself. Do you see what I mean? And the next thing you're going to do is 6 times 5, right? So that might be the next thing on the worksheet. Can you do 6 times 5?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Then you're going to see this presented in this more complicated syntax. And can you access that? Figure out what the first thing is. Well, do the stuff in the parentheses, underline it, make parentheses. Yep. Do that stuff. And then you're set up with the next step. You've already performed it in isolation. And can you bring it to bear? If it's larger, what I'll usually do is do maybe the first step or two of the problem. So just think how that would get simplified, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would take that simplified version where there's maybe only a couple of steps and present that up here and say, look, that's what you're going for. You're going to try to make this complicated version look like that one that you can solve that has just a couple of steps. So you're just bridging one extra step in there every time. So there's lots of ways to do it, Slower and louder is a bad idea. You got to structure. And, you have to, as a teacher, you've got to change. And I think that's the biggest thing that you look at. I look at a classroom and I'll see someone who's real rigid as a teacher. I'll say, who's the least able to change in this environment? It's you. You're the one that's got to change a little bit and be a little flexible. It doesn't mean make things less rigorous. It's doing the homework and figuring out what's a way that this child can process and be successful. And you're going to find that maybe in art class, maybe you're going to find it in gym class, maybe in language arts class. There's some island of competence that you can use to try to create a way for that kid to take that information in, and then perhaps do the horrible spelling of that, which is the hard part, right? Make sure they understand it. Make sure they have the semantic background, the conceptual understanding of it. They can tell you what the answer is. Like, okay, you're halfway there. Now we have to spell this horrible thing. Let's see what it's going to look like. But you already have the answer. Let's find a way to get 6 out of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the most enlightening things that I saw when it came to math itself was, I think it was the fall of 2019. I got to sit through a lecture from William Van Cleve, and he was actually talking about math problems. but he was applying, what he specialized in, which is really the language of written expression itself, to math problems. And most math problems are 90% deflection and 10% equation, right? Or 90% extraneous information that has absolutely zero relevance to the equation itself. He was really using language. And, I think that this is a continuation of what we were talking about earlier was, he was cutting out all of the superfluous by honing in on keywords, but he was doing that partly through grammar itself of what's the noun here, what's the verb here, and cutting out all of the extraneous to go, at the end of this massive paragraph, he was like, Mary needs to,
Just the facts, right?
just
Yes,
the facts.
he had a wonderful way. I had the opportunity to. We both presented in Dallas, where we worked, and so I was able to talk with him for quite a while. And I'm really a language guy. I'm not a math guy. If you knew me back in my formative years, I didn't have math for like a whole year. When I was in fourth grade, we have an open classroom where it's like,
Okay.
Be cool and go learn what you want. Ask me a question if you want. That was not effective. So I didn't really have a lot of formative math training. I don't think I had the capacity to learn it. I eventually did, obviously. But I just really had pretty horrible instruction. Not direct instruction. Anyway, I'm a language person. And when I look at word problems, when you say, look at keywords and underline them, well, ands in almost every word problem. Don't do that. There's highlighting, highlight the important stuff. Well, at the lower levels, you have a yellow word problem. It doesn't help you at all, right? So I teach the introduction to word problems. I do it by categorization. So as you look at the numbers, I don't do direct point per point, like, okay, is equal at that level. I start looking at, if you have examples, you have nouns in there, and then think what the overarching category is. That's going to be the sum, right? So you have 3 bananas and 2 oranges. How many fruits are there? So I'll say, okay, if you know 2 parts, one part, you underline it, and the other part,
Yep.
and you underline that, you put those 2 together and say that's adding. And when you get done, the answer is going to be the category of what you're looking at. And you have a graphic organizer that's a linear diagram that looks like that. So you're going to box the word that has the category in it. If you know that, and one of the parts gets underlined, just like the subtraction sign. I mean, it makes so much more sense. That's what's coming out in Nessie. It's going to be very exciting. I can't wait for that to get released all over the world. So that's happening. Beta testing in the spring, summer, and it should be released in the fall. So that's going to be great.
And I saw, I don't know if you remember this from prior conversations, but I actually saw some early pieces of that when you were here in Houston for the Houston branch of the IDA's spring conference. Gosh, was that 2020, right before the whole COVID
It was a
shutdown?
while. Yeah, it was, right? Yeah. This has been in development for a long time. It's going to be amazing. It is. And the animators and the creativity of that company, it's just so fun. I keep giving them impossible missions, and they like what they showed me is fantastic. And I can even share some of that if you want to. I can show you
Yeah, absolutely.
a quick thing, but we'll make sure we sneak that in before the end.
No, that would be amazing. And I mean, Nessie's a great platform. So I think it would be great to have math be a part of that platform, just because it's such a big need for our community too. But another thing that you and I were talking about earlier, I wanted to switch gears for a second and give you the example that I had shared with you of my son, who, when he was originally diagnosed with dyslexia in the summer of 2016, which was between first and second grade, all of his math diagnostics were 2 points below gifted. Fast forward now, it's the spring of 2023. And he does not have dyscalculia, but all of his math is now 3 standard deviations below the mean. And the diagnostician, being, a really great diagnostician, really dug into that while he was being tested, of course. And because at first she was like, maybe this child has dyscalculia, and she really started digging into it. And he really didn't understand basic multiplication and division. He didn't recognize, because he's never been taught the symbols. He was trying to solve everything through base 10. And even as I shared with you, most of us carry iPhones, right? If you drag down from the upper right-hand corner, you get the calculator. If you hold your phone upright, you get a simple calculator. If you turn it to the side, you get a financial calculator. Well, he's using the financial calculator, and he was using it in elementary. Now he's using it in junior high, and he's typing in the whole equation. He didn't recognize the division symbol. He didn't know what that was. And I'm been blown away that this child who is borderline gifted in math is now struggling as immensely as he is. But where my frustration comes in is that seemed to be a lack of instruction more than anything else, that he doesn't possess the language that you've been talking about so far.
Yeah, he has some of the language probably, but the problem is it doesn't have correspondence with the symbolic code.
Yeah.
See what I mean? So where it's represented, that's in a sense, that's a decoding and an written expression thing you have to get over. So again, you got to link the non-symbolic code, like understanding what division means, that you're going to put things into different groups. And then you've got to understand what that looks like. When you write that division symbol, if you blew it up, realize it would look like a fraction. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And coupling that's bread and butter for what I do. My fraction organizer looks exactly like that. It's going to be a box on the circle, which is the dividend, right? And then you're going to put the fraction bar in there, which means divided by, and then underneath it's the divisor. There's a circle around it. And in the division symbol as a fraction, it's also in the matrix diagram, and it links it all together. So you can see how fractions and multiplication and division are all related. So it's key to do that, and you got to practice. So we do gross motor things where we have like that would be written on the sidewalk in chalk, right? So picture that same 6-pack model, right? The 6 cans and then 2 on the left because it's 2 cans high and 3 cans. All right. So if you started on the 3, you'd be standing on it. You jump to the 2 and say 3 times 2 equals the 6, and the 6 is in the big rectangle. You see what I mean? And using all those structures, the numbers get bigger, but you learn syntax that way. And you learn how it goes backwards. So you're standing on the 6, all the parts, right? And you say 6 divided by the 2, and then you jump up at the top is 3. So you learn the motor plan, and it's strapped to that language. So you give them a whole to part model, and then they have to model it part to whole with language, right? And in that process, they integrate all those codes, the non-symbolic, where things go, and then the symbolic visual code, the numbers, and also the division sign, and then they verbalize it. So those are those 3 pieces that they have to have, that you always need to be cognizant of, how those three codes work together.
I also want to ask you, I think, one thing that I don't know if this is a myth or not, so I'm going to ask you to put on your Mythbuster hat if it is.
Yeah.
But I think that there's a lot of belief in the community that our kids cannot learn times tables.
They don't learn with traditional instruction, and here's why. They'll horse through it. Either they just over rely on the verbal code, like you're memorizing phone numbers. That'll work for a while, but you can't remember like 100 phone numbers. It doesn't work anymore, right? Okay, so you start teaching like you would with language. You start teaching with divisibility rules, kind of like the linguistic code, right? So you start saying, well, what these look like. And again, that's the NESI stuff in development. It's really cool. But you're looking at how you're able to predict patterns, just like you predict linguistic patterns. So pat, sat, fat, pat, and ZAT. It's not a word, but it's ZAT. I recognize the at. That's what, it's an even number. It's a multiple of 2, things like that. You start getting, you get these smart kids to start seeing the patterns and say, 2 times 7 is not 17, even though it looks and sounds like it could be. It's not an even number. So don't even think about that, right? Being able to understand that. And then also it's the efficiency with how they store the facts. So it's retrieval as a function of storage. If you store it in a stupid place, if you take a book and hurl it in the library, you're not going to find it. It's in the right room, but you can't find that book. So
Right.
you really need to put that in a hierarchy. Like if you're teaching the 5 times family, right? Then you put the kid in the middle of a big clock, like in a kiddie pool, you know what I mean? The circle, or the basketball key where you're looking at the basket and you start learning where the 3 and the 6 and the 9 are. And you get a relational understanding of where all these facts live, right? And then you're able to start estimating. So if you said, again, I teach multiplication facts first with division. So I'll say, here's 15. If you're in the clock, point to 15 minutes. And what number are you pointing at? The 3. 15 divided by 5 is 3. You see? And then, okay, say multiplication fact based on that. And 3 times 5 is 15. And they're pointing to that same location. Again, all that's organized within that face of the clock. And what's bad is our kids these days don't use the analog clock. They look at their phone, right? And they get the time off that. And it's digital and it's not relational. It's instrumental. In other words, it might say 2:58. Now, you remember being in elementary school. If the clock was pointing at 2:58, all you're thinking of is the school bus is coming in 2 minutes, right?
Yep.
And you ask the kid, what's after 2:58? And they say 2:59. And you're like, oh my goodness. You know what I mean? You've got to be able to, again, have a robust understanding of these quantities. And then you've got to compare them all the time. And if you're able to do that, that's what drives number sense. It's the act of comparing. And so these kids that are just getting the organization of here's a flashcard, you know it or you don't, and you throw it in one pile if you have it and another pile if you don't. Where's the organization in that? Nowhere, right? At the very least, I mean, you could do a linear one where you're saying, let's do the 2 times facts. And I put 2 times 10 way up here and it's 20. All right, so where's 2 times 5? And I've got my 5 kind of by my belt would be, you know what I mean? It's half as much, and half of 20 is 10. Do you see how you're starting to put that in an organizational hierarchy?
Yep.
That is so instrumental for that to strapping on so that you're not learning how to spell all the words in the dictionary by starting with the A's. That's just so foolish, right? You've got to be a linguist with this. How did you effectively teach language and how to start reading and looking at patterns, like with Let's Read or something like that. And you're looking at how all these things have these consistencies, but are the same in one part, like the AT part, and then there's a different onset. You know what I mean? It's more like all these, there's like a family, but then this is a little different. And that difference connotes this is what the value is going to be, right? So it's organization, and that's usually where everything explodes. It takes them longer. I mean, the person that founded Landmark School, Charles Drake, did his work, his thesis work on automatization, and he found that most dyslexic kids, it takes them up to 10 times the amount of stimulants to get the desired response, right? So they need more practice. And there's a lot of reasons for that. It could be that they're not processing the language well, or they're not using, again, executive function, or they haven't been provided with any structure to append some organization to what they're trying to learn, right? So again, there's lots of reasons why that can happen, and it's a problem, but there are solutions. So
Yeah. Speaking of solutions, so I had one question sent to me where this parent was asking, because the term dyscalculia is so new to schools, And, I'm in a state where I've advocated for other parents, and I can't for the life of me get some of these school districts to even say that word, right? They're determined to say specific learning disability in math. And, I can argue Shaywitz logic with them all day long, but I've never been able to get them to actually say the word. But back to the question, how do you recommend to parents that they find well-trained tutors and or find a way to guide the school to what is a well-trained tutor? One thing that I know I struggled with for a really long time, I've never, okay, not never, I've hired my first math tutor, but my son won't start with this person until the fall. Every math tutor I've ever spoken to, I've asked the question, I'm like, have you ever worked with a dyslexic child? Do you understand dyslexia? And every single one of them has said no. And again, my child's not dyscalculic, but for those children, how do you recommend parents going about and finding the right help?
That's a great question. And the answer is disturbing. If you go to teacher education programs in colleges, I know when I went through it, it was the amount of time that they spent for neurodivergent people was nothing. And if you looked at the textbooks for math in terms of, if you have learning disabilities in math, 3 pages on, like, maybe you could do it again, like slower, louder, or give them bypass methods. It's abysmal. So you really need to go to a specialist. And the problem is there aren't a lot, because not a lot of people want to, look at that naked emperor on the horse. It's like there are all kinds of people that say, look, they have this diagnosis of math disability, which isn't horrible. It's a label. It doesn't define the services you're supposed to get. It just means that you're not doing well in math based on your height and age, right? Okay, so at that point, you need to look deeper, and you need to be able, I mean, first of all, people that are doing the evaluations need to tighten that up. Don't look at a kid that has gaping holes in their naming scores and everything, and then just say, and how it gets evaluated is math fluency. You don't have any math scores because your fluency score, you're bad at math. Look at your fluency score. Well, if you're dysgraphic, it's going to be terrible.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with whether you understand the concepts. It just means that you can't move your pencil efficiently and organize that output fast. So say what it is. Say what the kid has that's making it hard. Be specific. If you look at how you evaluate a kid in the language domain, you're looking at phonemic awareness. You're looking at all these different tests. And for each one of those tests, there's usually like a program. This is what you need to do to work on that. You can do exactly the same thing in math, and you should. And most of it's going to have that same central idea of where is the kid strong and not strong within the context of the language testing. And most of the WISC is language testing, and it's not written output testing. I mean, what do you do for written output on the WISC? You got coding, right? What else? Where else do you really have a lot of written output? So you've got to be able to define what is the problem, and not just use that, you have brown hair kind of designation, or you didn't do well on this grade level math test. The bigger question is not the questions that you got wrong. It's why did you get those questions wrong?
Mm-hmm.
So I have a great diagnostic test that I give where I have like a long division problem. And then if you think of all the steps in there, you're going to have to do, smaller division facts and multiplication facts that are related. You're going to have to do subtraction. If you can't subtract, you can't do long division. All those problems for that division problem are presented earlier, right? So can you do all those sub skills? And then can you put them all together? So is this an integration problem? Is this a language problem where you can't sequence things with working memory? What's really going on? And what's the plan that you're going to make for that individual to make them successful? And it's not just attacking it at grade level. It's like, what are those fundamental pieces that are missing that's making it so you can't process at this level? So stops, extra help with long division. No, figure out what they can't do within that process. That's where they need the help, and probably not that much of it to get them through it. But you've got to drive, and you can't just throw a book at them and say, we're on page 47 today. Do it again. You didn't do a good job. That's not helpful.
Yeah, and most schools across the country don't even use textbooks anymore.
It's true. There's not, you can't even help them then. So my advice is, if you're going to get a tutor, somebody that's really good in math is probably not who you want. You want somebody that's really good in teaching language remediation. Do you see what I mean? Because they understand the process that you should go through. This is really teaching a second language. And it's a simpler language, but you go about it the same way. You go through those same hurdles of, do you understand, again, that phonemic relationship? Well, it's a quantity relationship, but that's the basis. And then you're going to start building words, right? And then the sentences. And if you can attack it like that, you're going to be much more successful as a tutor than if you're just trying to, again, find a problem type and just drill and kill. That's been done and it didn't work, right? So don't keep doing it. Make a plan. Yeah.
So another question is, how do you recommend addressing math anxiety and or math PTSD for a dyscalculic child? Do you find that sometimes the math difficulties disappear after addressing the anxiety or PTSD?
Yeah. Yes, they do. They do. I have this most wonderful young lady that I started with at the beginning of this year, and she had all types of issues with math. I mean, so became a physical manifestation. It was severe. Right now, she goes up to the chalkboard and she's like, Mr. Woodin, let me show you how to do this. And she's teaching the class. And it starts out finding what's wrong, finding an island of competence. You can do this. You explain it to me, and you keep going systematically like you would as a language tutor, the same way. You can read this word. And if you're looking for fluency, go down a step, right? You don't read Moby Dick faster. You go to, this is something, you know how to do this. Homework should be something where you're not doing anything new, not breaking any new ground. This is the stuff that you want to have the kid do for fluency, all that repetition, so you don't have to spend time in class doing it. Then you use those skills to apply to the stuff you're teaching them in class. So here's your fact work for homework. Leave that out on your desk. We're going to use those to do multi-step multiplication props. You see what I mean? So it's all figuring out where the kid is, find the floor, establish trust, like this is going to work. It's not going to be what didn't work 2 schools ago, right? We're not going to do the same thing again. We're not going to count stuff. We're going to show you how to get this. And the first thing I always say to my students and the teachers that are learning, if you don't get it, it's my fault. It's like, and I asked them, if you don't get it, whose fault is it? And like, point to me. I'm the person getting paid. If you don't get it, say, I don't get it. And I'll say, geez, thanks for telling me. Because I'm going to try again tomorrow, or I'm going to try something different. And it's my fault if you don't get it. So you own that with the kid. And they learn really quickly that you're not just saying, oh, that was great. It's like when they do something great, you say, what do you think of that? And they say, that was great. And they own it. Yeah. That's how you turn that around.
I love that answer. So in my head, with everything that you've said, all of a sudden I was like, okay, so there's a reading rope. There's a writing rope.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about creating a math rope?
Well, hopefully it's not long enough to hang myself with, right? I like that analogy. I think it's been overused. I think everybody gets that there's tendrils within tendrils, and you need to, have competence with all these different sub-skills and put it together. I think that's the cornerstone of learning any process, right? So you have to, again, it's knitting together, first of all, semantics, all the context, along with all the mechanics. And of course, all that's important. Again, I like that. I like the idea that if you can make those fundamental problems go away, looking at the coding issues, whether it's the motoric, all those things go away. If you can make those a little bit seamless, then all of a sudden you're able to start processing up here. You see what I mean? If all your work is struggling with, I've got to write this out and I've got to decode it, and this is what the problem is, and you never get a fluent expression, you don't get enough time to start using the semantics. And that's probably, if you're dyslexic, that's what you got. You see what I mean? Don't mess with that. So instead of doing like things like groups, there's, things, there's pencils in groups of 3. No, there's not. There's 3 tennis balls in a can. Use that, you know what I mean? And there's 4 cans, and the kid can have a semantic understanding of how many tennis balls there are. Do you see what I mean? It's using neat tricks that already have a lot of that language integrated. So if I say the word hooves and you're thinking it's math class, I'm hoping you're thinking 4. I never said that. You opened that folder up, right? And now I'm going to put more things in that folder.
I like
It's tricks like that, yes. And it's the robust understanding of these quantities that makes it so you can link it to your world and it's meaningful. So,
Well, as somebody who always struggled with math myself, I can definitely appreciate that explanation for sure. I know you had prepared something that you wanted to show everybody.
well, tell you what, I know we're close to the end. So here's something
Are.
that I think might be really helpful. I've brought up a lot of different points, and it's hard for you to remember all that stuff. So if you go to woodenmath.com, it's a free website, there's tons of information. If you want to perhaps look at any of the articles or the people's names I've mentioned or the research that I alluded to, all the references are on this. So go to my website, you'll see the lovely Coffee Talk logo, a picture of me with Nessie, and in the middle, there's a link right there. If you click on it, you'll get a handout that has a bunch of information. Some of the videos won't work for you, I'm sorry, but the videos are available in the website if you look. But you'll get some of those graphic organizers I talked about and some pictures from Nessie and things like that. I just can't wait for the release, and you'll know when it happens because I'm sure they're very good at advertising.
There.
And you'll be able to check that out. But if you have any questions, if you look at that website and you start poking around, you get all kinds of information. Every first Tuesday of every month, I also do Wooden Math Wednesday, Wooden Math Tuesdays. Used to be Wednesday, but you can go to Wooden Math. It's a Facebook group. It's not mine. It's not my Facebook group. It's ladies that started it that use this all the time, and it's a place where you can bounce ideas off of other people, ask questions, and I answer the questions once a month. So that's another resource. But lots of information out there for you to gather. So I'll let you guys do that.
Is there a target? I know you said this year, but is there a target date with Nessie? Is it this summer or maybe this fall?
Yeah, the beta testing version comes out this spring. So that goes out and it gets tested all over, probably in schools all over the world, basically, that are English speaking. But then after the bugs get worked out and everything's good, it's scheduled hard release in the fall. So that's going to be out there, and it's meant to be a grade level program. So this is made for younger children to develop numeracy. So it's kind of tapping into that pre-K through second grade market. That's the most important time for strapping on all those quantities and making it so that you're able to become numerate. And once you do that, the rest of the math will strap on, and it has graph motor teaching into it where you're using the mouse and touch screen, things like that. So it's much more interactive than flashcard drill. It's not what it is. It integrates understanding the concepts first. It's really exciting and fun to watch, and it has all types of practice, but you understand it before you practice it. It's pretty good.
Well, I'm definitely, like I mentioned earlier, I saw early design of that you shared here in Houston 3 years ago.
Yeah, it's gotten so much better, and the animation's fantastic. It's just hilarious. Yeah, it's coming. I have some, but yeah.
Definitely looking forward to that. So beyond that sounded very final thought, but I'm just going to, ask the question, is there something that I've not asked you maybe that you feel should be said, and to what our audience is maybe looking for?
I would just like to say, if your kid has dyslexia and has been remediated within the language domain, and they have math problems, just think there's programs out there that'll do the same thing within the context of math. But just like the programs that they had in the language remediation realm, how specific they were to your kids' specific issues, right? And that's how you're going to fix this. You're not going to fix it by just hitting it with a bigger hammer. You're going to have to be diagnostic and prescriptive. What is the problem? And make a plan that's consistent with what you did in the language realm. And use woodenmath.com. It's a free resource. You can there's lots of help if you go to that again, that website. And Wooden Math's getting huge. It's being done in, like, Chicago. Redwood is pumping out Wooden Math programs. In Manhattan, you've got Parkside. In Atlanta, you got Swift. You got Robinson School in Puerto Rico. They're everywhere. Everybody's using my stuff because it works. And I'm not making money on it. It's like, I want to help you out. So use what you can. It's not a program. They're tools to go and use to work to solve a problem. So
I love that. Well, again, I know I had come across your people talking about your webpage before I ever heard you speak, of course. And I know that people consider it a massive resource. So I love hearing that schools are using your program and making change for our kids. As a parent who's very frustrated with math education, I definitely appreciate everything that you have shared with us today. And I'm so grateful that you're willing to be a guest on Coffee Talk and come on and special Friday session and share everything that you do for our children and everything that you know. So thank you so much.
you're welcome. I had a blast. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everybody. I'm going to post a link to his website, and there's some other links. Nessie's provided me with some links as well. I'm going to put all of that in the comments.
Fantastic.
And everybody have a really great day. Thank you. If I can figure out how, there we go. Stop recording.